symbolism, individualism, and formalism, even and absurdity. Right? Modernism thus ushered a change in culture, society, and literature and art. In all these sectors, you find a lot of changes. My dear students, for these terms, actually, we can have a separate class, because if I keep going discussing these sub movements, then we can cannot discuss the kind of things that I have for you now. So don't worry, for these literary movements of modernism, we can have a separate class for that, or I will make a separate class, organize a separate class for you. Then, my dear students, even as a modernism started on a rebellious note against traditions, it harbored nostalgia and even deep regret for all those lost fragments from the earliest ages. In the poem, you must be familiar with this poem. This is one of the iconic poems of by T.S. Eliot, "The Wasteland." And my dear students, in the year in which this poem was published, 1922, is very interesting year, because this year comes up with many other important writings by important and canonical writers. So this poet T.S. Eliot explicitly says, "These fragments I have shot against my ruin." Right, and this single line sums up a despairing nostalgia for what has been lost. So the kind of a agony he he had, right, in his heart is delineated through this line. And the loss of all certainties that had earlier sustained society in the past had caused a vacuum in the absence of sustainability, this sustainable replacement. And "The Wasteland" appeared 4 years after World War First ended in 1988, World War, and then got published in 1922. And Eliot was affected by the emotional and spiritual sterility that was both the cause and consequence of the war, right? Because post wars, post World War situation is very draconian. It affects the society and almost like the entire world in many ways. So human being had lost even faith in God and religion, and in the absence of any strong anchor to hold on to, were rudderless and lost even the passion for life. They led a life in death existence, a life without hope of salvation, or you can say like a life of disillusionment and despair, with no possibility of moral and spiritual regeneration, right? And all that remained were the broken cultural fragments from vanished past that remained to be salvaged, holding out the vestige of hope as a distinct possibility. My dear students, Eliot's Wasteland actually mirrored the mental, emotional, and spiritual aridity of the time, and the triple repetition of Om Shanti at the end of the poem sounds more like wishful thinking. Eliot's poem mirrored even paralysis of mind and sterility of emotions, where the brain actually seemed paralyzed, emotions sterile, and the spirit violated. So as one of the Holocaust survived, the survivors of this Holocaust said, like, "We have not died, we are dead. They have managed to kill in us not only our right to life in the presence, and for many of us, to be sure, the right to a future life. But what is most tragic is that they have succeeded with their sadistic and depraved method in killing in us all sense of human life in our past. All feelings of normal human beings endowed with the normal past, up to even the very consciousness of having existed, at one time as human being worthy of this name, right? And modernist literature is innovative and experimental in forms and content, as I told you in the beginning. And these experimental writings were all their height during the first 3 decades and slowly declined over the next 2 decades. So this intervening World War, like Second World War, 1939 to 45 is the timeline, as you all know, started the downslide of modernism, and less than the 2 decades thereafter, postmodernism became the dominant theory, right? So almost like you can say 1939 or beginning of the World War first, oh, sorry, second is the end of the modernism, right? So modernism, First World War, it can be connected with the modernism, and the Second World War can be connected with the postmodernism, right? This way, this is also one of the ways wherein like you can understand. Modernism peaked between 1910 and 1930s with some of the best works produced in England and Europe by great English poet, artist, and novelist like uh, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, W.B. Yeats, and Levi's Virginia Woolf. Like very 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 big name, and Wallace Stevenson and Gertrude Stein. These all are big names. And above all, I would like to say like German writers Marcel Proust and Stephen Malone, Andre Gide, and Franz Kafka, Rene Maria Rilke. Many such names are there. Like, and their writings were characterized by two important some important ideas wherein like I would like to focus on impressionism and subjectivity, the like how we see rather than what we see as evident in the stream of consciousness technique, right? That was very prevalent. Second, rejecting objectivity in novels such as an omniscient external narration, well defined moral position, and fixed narrative points of view. Third point I would like to add here is like blurring of genres, whereby I'm sorry, novels are poetic and lyrical, and poems more like prose documentaries. Third is fragmented form, discontinued narrative, and mounted of colleges of disparate materials, and the last point, a tendency towards reflexivity, whereby the writings such as novels or poem raise issues about their status and their nature. So these points actually very clearly, categorically uh, coming up with the terms of the time, right? And now would like to talk about postmodernism, my dear student. I hope you must be enjoying this lecture and would be benefited a lot, and it will really maintain the foundation of your literariness. So, modernism began to decline in 1930s, and the 1960s saw the beginning of the postmodernism, right? And postmodernism, like modernism, is also characterized by its, eclectic approach, like the use of fragmented forms, wherein, like, you can recall the wasteland, right? And these fragments I have shot against my ruin. Mm, this line was, said by T.S. Eliot, and by its preference for literary writings and absence of omniscient narrator. But the difference arises in the mood, attitude, and outlook of the two genres towards these uh, three features. Right? Modernism is characterized by regrets for having lost those fragments from the earlier ages. And Eliot's line quoted above is a despairing nostalgia for what has been lost, right? As I mentioned. But the modernism celebrates a fragmentation as it liberates him or her from fixed system of belief. And the second difference, relates to the attitude or tone of the work, like modern art, literature, and architecture for guys critical of the over elaborating, art form of 19th century. And this fierce aestheticism was one of the features of modernism, and modernist architect ignored decoration decoration, pointing out that house is a machine to live in. And the remarkable thing about the high idealism was that even when it was ascetic in nature and shunned all aesthetic ornamentation, it had the power to move. Right. And in post-modern literature written in 1950s, soon after the end of the World War II, this is reflected in minimalism and by shrinking poems to two word lines. Like, and Samuel Beckett brought a new theater of minimalistic plays, like plays that have a stage time of 13 minutes play or 13 minutes, and plays that have just one speaker, and plays where the setting is bare and the costumes reduced to the barest minimum of faded and torn jeans shirts, but encapsulating within them profound observation on the meaninglessness of life and on the futility and absurdity of existence. Right. So my dear student, this is even very interesting. I would like to uh, you know, uh, give you some homework also, like that you can explore further, and you can try to seek answers to certain questions, like discuss the major characteristics of modernism. After listening to my lecture, you can answer these questions, right? Because uh, if you listen to this lecture carefully, you will definitely be in a position to answer these questions and write your own answer yourself, right? So it will really benefit you in exam or maintaining your better command and understanding over literature. Second question that you can answer is the name five British modernist writers and write a short essay on their literary achievement, right? Third is explain how the characteristics of modernism are different from those of postmodernism, right? My dear students, in the next in the series of this lecture, the next topic I would like to add on is postmodern criticism. My dear student, postmodern themes like absurdity and meaninglessness of existence, the loss of hope of restoring meaning and order to life are explored in the literary works of 20th century that talks about in a critical way. Second, postmodern identities are not seen in single genre representing a literary work, but in a mixing of genres such as thrillers, like myths, psychological novels, and detective stories in a work of fiction. This is also seen in the notion of language. Like Beckett and other absurd dramatists use language to show its emptiness and its viscity, and which therefore cannot be used to capture any transcendental reality. Third point, that the part the this way you say, like the past is not destroyed as in modernism, but in the postmodernist revisits the past with irony, right? Like the word Godot in Samuel Beckett's play is a pun on God, right? So it's a pun on God, like Godot, the term. The Waiting for Godot is a very popular and very sort of classical play by Samuel Beckett, which is based on absurdism, right? And the two Two tramps at the center of the play wait for Gorot. Gorot, like Gorot is a nostalgia for the lost wholeness of the past and a pale imitation of waiting for non-existent Gorot. Like means Gorot is you can say like identity, which is you know sort of a confusion, which is sort of like a confusion, like there is no existence of God, but still you know these the people, the characters, they are waiting desperately for God from morning to evening, evening to morning, like this way. So Lucky's garbled speech is also an example of the mind seeking to recall the past religious beliefs and ending with a deranged outpouring of words that parody the certainty of language and faith of the past. And guys, the meaninglessness of waiting in the waiting for Godot, and it is an, like you can say, like activity that we carry out throughout our lives, is again an attempt to seek a non-existent external savior or a force to alleviate our misery and suffering. So waiting is seen in Anton Chekhov's, Three Sisters also, where they wait for 23 hours in a train for an, you know, external force to enter and transform their provincial, mundane life. And their optimism for the future is seen in their creation of an image of Moscow, which is full of glitter and glamour, a mix of, memory and desire, as a kind of hyper reality, or simulacrum, right? So simulacrum is a term which is used for hyper reality, right? So my dear students, next with this thing I would like to add on to postmodernism in literature and art. So as you all know that we have seen that 20th century was dominated by modernism and postmodernism, and in the last decade of the century there came a shift to postmodernism or metamodernism that was both a recreation uh, or uh, or kind of an activity or reaction against and perpetuation of modernist aesthetics. Okay, and later postmodernism of 1980s rejected modernist as aestheticism as a elite and insisted on the mixing bits and pieces from the past ages, such as colorful imageries, viewpoints, and vocabularies in a bizarre and jumbled way. So one such example is that of a Craig Rain, who, along with Christopher Reen, invented what is known as now Martian poetry. So in his poem, Martian sends a postcard home. The the poet expresses his impression of humanity in terms that seem strange and puzzling at first, and need a little working out before one realizes what poet is referring to, right? So that is there in the poem, and it is in working out the puzzle that the reader derives a lot of fun from, like this poem, right? So my dear students, the things are going on in this way, like in a very different manner. Now if you have any question, you can ask before we go to the next topic or next booklet. I would like to open this session for questions and doubts. If you have any, you can ask. Yes, please. Yes, my dear students, are you listening to me? Hello? Can somebody say yes or no?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir, your voice is audible.
Okay. So if you don't have questions, so shall I continue with the lecture?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My dear students, the lecture that you know I am delivering now, I'm actually recording this lecture for your for your sake. Just a moment, please. Hold on. Yes, I'm sorry, guys. I had a call. Just can you give me 2 minutes, please? Just a moment. Yes, yes, my dear students. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, so I would like to tell you, something important related to the postmodern literature and postmodernism as a period, literary period. In 1980s, there was a German theorist named Jürgen Habermas looked at modernism as a continuation of the age of enlightenment with its focus on reason and its break with the blind faith in tradition and slavish obedience to religious perception precepts and its uh, proscription as a means to reform society. And he felt that French structuralists like Michel Foucault or Jacques Derrida repudiated enlightenment and attacked the ideals of reason, clarity, truth, and progress. And Jean Francois Lyotard, in his essay, very iconic essay, "What is Modernism?" in 1982, obliquely questioned Habermas's attack on modernist attempt at artistic experimentation and at ending the heritage of avant-garde, which is like avant-garde is a like, term which says like advanced group of artists, writers, musicians whose works are unorthodox and experimental, right? Means modern in its sense. He said that the Enlightenment had been authoritative, prescriptive, and overarching in legislative our life. Such meta narratives seeking to explain reason and order did not accommodate plurality and differences. Lyotard defined postmodernism as incredulity towards meta narrative, and Lyotard analyzed the notion of knowledge in postmodern society as the end of the grand narratives or meta narrative, which he considered a quintessential feature of modernity, guys. And Lyotard's introduced the term postmodernism. So those grand rules that purported towards establishing progress and human perfectibility are no longer tenable. Hence, the change was for mini narrative that provide a basis for different groups placed in different circumstances. And postmodernism is in a way that deconstruction of enlightenment. Right here. Another writer and French, he is also from France, French writer, Jean Baudrillard, and his book is very famous, like Simulation. The writer's book is like name is Simulation was translated into English in 1983. The book deals with concept of loss of the real, which happens as a result of images from films, TV, advertisements, making it difficult to distinguish between the real and the imagined and reality illusions surface and depth. So the superficial reality hides a hidden reality and has brought in a new culture of hyper reality. Right. So he explains it in this way. In the past, a sign was an outward representation of an inner depth of reality, such as blessing as an outward sign of an inner grace. But according to Baudelaire, sign is not necessarily an index of inner reality, but that of other signs. So then the whole system becomes one of the simulacrum, means like a slight unreal or superficial likeness or semblance. This representation is substituted by simulation, like how does this thing happen? So my dear students, I would like to tell you these things in a in point wise. Like number one point would for this thing, like how does this thing happen? Like is a sign in the earlier times represented the basic reality actually. Through sign, we used to understand the basic reality through science actually. This is a system of sign, which was the society was in an industrial society or industrial city of 20th century is shown by some painting crowds of lean thin figures in a street, the horizon showing the factories like buildings gray and muted colors to stress the monotony and the mechanical quality of life there. So this is a representation of very basic reality of the industrialized society of England in the 20th century, right? Second, there's a misrepresentation or distortion of reality. Like the 19th century Victorian artist shows the city at night and glamorizing it by showing wet pavements reflecting the bright light from the shop. This is a wonderful painting, but far distant from the reality, guys. And you know, this reality of grim and soot that typify an industrial city. Hence, the sign is a distortion of reality in its sense. Third, here a sign is a representation of representation, like surrealistic painting that portrays, expresses, or interprets the workings of the subconscious mind is a good example for this thing. And let me consider an example of painting by Rene Magritte. The painting, that shows an very easel with a canvas on it, along with a window. On the canvas is painted the exterior scene as seen through the windows. And this exterior scene is not what we see outside of a window, but it is an imaginative representation of reality in a painting within a painting. And this sign has no reality and distinguishes the fact that there is no corresponding reality underneath. So, next point, the sign bears no relation to reality, right? And this is seen in abstract painting, which is not representational at all, like that you can enjoy in your booklets also, first booklet. And the painter who created this painting is Marshall Decamp. He said, my aim was a static representation of movement, a static composition of indication of various positions taken by form movements, with no attempts to give cinema effects through painting. And the reduction of a head in movement to a bare line seemed to me defensible. Right. Okay. So, my dear students, the four signs signify four different ways in which the painting signify or represent